This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. Every family story is unique. For some, the path to parenthood is straightforward. For others, it's filled with years of hope, heartbreak, perseverance, and unimaginable strength. Today's guest has written an unforgettable memoir that shines a light on a journey so many people experience, but far too few openly discuss. In Rainbow Baby, Jennifer Shebib shares her deeply personal story of infertility, miscarriage, IVF, a failed adoption, delayed motherhood, and ultimately becoming a first-time mother at the age of 47. It's a story about resilience, partnership, grief, joy, and believing that miracles sometimes arrive on a different timeline than we expect. More importantly, it's a book that gives voice to countless families who have silently endured fertility struggles and reminds readers that hope can survive even life's greatest heartbreaks. Jennifer, welcome to the Speaking of Writers podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. So what made you decide that now was the right time to tell your story, and who did you hope would find Rainbow Baby?
Well, Steve, I've been thinking about writing the story since I had my rainbow baby, Nicholas, because I had some time. Once I had him, I reflected back on everything I'd gone through to have him. And I remember thinking during that journey that there wasn't a lot of support. There was support, but it was coming from a science angle or a doctor angle. And I wanted to connect with just mothers or people expecting mothers or prospective mothers that maybe had a similar journey, and I wasn't finding that. Unfortunately, I've been in executive recruiting for 20 plus years. And a few months ago, I lost my position due to an acquisition. So what that did leave me with was time. So then I decided, okay, well, maybe there's a sign. Maybe it's time to tell my story. So while looking for a job, I was able to write this book. And my hope was that it would reach, women out there. I'm certainly not alone. I know many women have been through this journey, have walked this path, but infertility is often taboo. It's very personal, which I completely understand. Many women don't want to tell the story, but I feel like maybe it's because they haven't been able to connect with others that have been so vulnerable about their story. So my hope is by my putting everything that I went through, very raw, very real, what it's like to go through the fertility journey, having a child at a mature age, the guilt, the shame, everything that you carry. I wanted it to be out there. I wanted it to be something that other women and men, for that matter, because this journey is for them too. Just not the physical one, but the emotional one is there. So I was hoping to connect with couples that are going through a similar path, that them could pick it up and say, oh, wow, there is still hope for me, in my 40s, late 40s, because when I was going through the process, I just didn't have the resources that I was hoping for. They didn't really talk about some of the options. I would always hear of women having their babies in their late 40s. And I was like, well, then obviously I can do it. But you didn't really know what was behind the scenes that allowed them to have the baby. So that's why I told my story, because I feel like it is sometimes a taboo or a topic that we shy away from, but it was important for me to put it out there in hopes I could connect with others.
Jennifer, the phrase Rainbow Baby represents hope after unimaginable loss. What does that term mean to you today?
It means kind of just what you said, that hope prevails. It's the rainbow after the storm. The storm wasn't only the loss of pregnancy, but just the journey it took me to get here. I actually have a tattoo of a rainbow with my son's name on it, because I want to be able to look at it every day and know, be reminded of everything that I went through to have him. So it's a very, why I named the book Rainbow Baby, because I think it will really resonate with others that have experienced a loss, but now are on the other side of it.
You begin by sharing your upbringing, career, and life experiences before trying to have a child. Why was it important for readers to understand who Jennifer was before becoming mom?
Well, I think it was important, Steve, because again, reading the book, you'll find this out. I didn't grow up really knowing if I wanted a family. I grew up in a multi-generational home, single mom who worked very hard. So those values were instilled in me. So that was on the forefront versus having a family. I knew I wanted to go to college and have a career. So it wasn't until almost my late 30s when I met my now husband Brad that I even really wanted a child. So I felt it was important to kind of lay that foundation for other women that may, have thought that they, didn't want children, but then later in life did. Things like back then, donor egg and freezing your eggs and those things really weren't in the conversation. So that's why it was important to me to kind of tell my story of where I was to lay that foundation so that, it was something that readers could connect with too, that maybe had also thought I wasn't sure if I was going to have a family.
You write openly about multiple IVF rounds, miscarriages, a failed adoption, financial stress, relationship pressure, and emotional exhaustion, too. Looking back, what and which part of that journey challenged you the most?
It's a great question. I think it was just the decision to keep going. After our first failed round, I remember saying, I don't think I can do this again to my husband.
Mm.
And then after, a little bit of healing, I said, I think I can do it again. And I think it was just being able to keep the hope through those processes, knowing that I was older, and that it might take a while. I think I was naive going into it, Steve. I thought, oh, I'm in shape, I'm healthy. I'll have first round one and done. I didn't expect to have to go through so many. So I think it was just the decision to keep going was absolutely the hardest.
One of the most beautiful themes in this book is that grief and joy can exist at the same time. Was that one of the hardest lessons to accept?
Yes. Yes, very much so. And where that really landed for me was once I had Nicholas. Finally, after years and years of trying, I had, my rainbow baby, but my miracle baby in front of me. And I was disconnected at first. Obviously, I was happy he was healthy and he was here, but I didn't immediately feel that overwhelming sense of joy that mothers always talk about. And that scared me. I thought, I carried a lot of guilt. Like, why don't I feel this? I went through all of this and now I don't feel that sense of, this is I love him more than anything in this world. So that was really profound for me. Something that it took a while for me, a lot of counseling and therapy. And, obviously eventually I got through it, but postpartum is a very real, very tough process that also women don't always talk about, and the shame behind it, quite frankly.
You mentioned your husband, Brad, earlier. You write movingly about Brad's unwavering support. How important was it to include his perspective in the story? And what did you learn about marriage through adversity?
Yeah, he was my rock. We always say, as the woman, we go through the physicality of the process, but then there's the emotional aspect that you have to lean on for your partner, and is also a loss for him too. Just because he isn't physically going through it doesn't mean he isn't going through his own grief and his own concerns. And a lot. He was worried about me. Like, are you sure you can do this again? And so just having someone, be such a true partner. I think is important. And if you're going to make the decision to go through something like this, you need to make sure that you have a really solid relationship and solid partner. Now, it got rocky there because of all the guilt that I carried when it wasn't successful. And in my head, I was thinking, well, he could just leave me for someone, that can give him the child that he wants without having to go through all this. But we had real conversation about that concern as we went through it. And so I think that's important to keep in mind is, shutting down wasn't an option for me. I needed to lean on him. And he was a great partner in that aspect.
Society often places expectations on when women should become mothers. What would you say to women who worry they've somehow missed their chance?
Yeah, I would say if you, really, want it to happen, there are there are things that you can do. Not IVF is not accessible for everybody. I realize it's an expensive process. I happen to work for a company where the insurance covered it, and this was before it was really normalized and more companies were offering it. I wouldn't have been able to go through it that many times, but I would say if you have the means, explore all your options. And just because you're, at a mature age, there are things resources that can help you. There's lots of foundations, lots of support out there. But if you, truly, don't give up on your dream, if that's truly something that you want, ask the right questions of your doctors, dig into your support system, make sure you have everything in place, and it could still be an option for you.
Many people understand infertility emotionally, but don't always realize the physical demands. What surprised you most about the toll it took on your body?
Yeah. So Steve, I was always athletic. I was, a runner. I was in shape, and those medications and the cadence of taking them and the amount you take them really does take a toll, emotionally and physically. I wasn't, there was times where I wasn't even able to really go for a walk just because of the side effects of the medications. They weren't debilitating, but they certainly made me more exhausted. In some ways it was frustrating, that I had to even, go through all of this. But I tried to keep my spirits up, and I tried to do what I could physically, but there were certainly days where it took me down. And it was, it was hard to kind of keep the normal activity that I was used to doing. So I had to take a step back and reevaluate how I was handling my physicality at that time.
Jennifer, there are moments in this memoir that are incredibly raw. Were there chapters you almost didn't include because they just felt too personal?
Yes. There were sections, I would say more or less than chapters, talking about the postpartum, not the immediate connection, even, once he was born and going through the difficulties of him not sleeping and, me just kind of second guessing, was this the right decision? Were we too old? Can I handle this? Will I ever connect with him? That was really difficult. And then the times where I was in a deep depression and, I thought about, do I want to be here anymore? That was really hard to write. And I know hard for my family and friends to read too, but it was a real emotion for me. I had it. Thankfully, I, got past it, and I, put Nicholas at the forefront. Everything I went through, I'm not going to, not be here to raise him and see him through. But there were the very dark times, and those were two sections that were what I did wonder if I would put down in the book. But I'm glad I did, because it was a real part of my journey.
Even readers here who haven't experienced infertility know disappointment and loss. Do you see Rainbow Baby as a story that's ultimately about resilience rather than fertility?
Yes, I kind of see it as both, but I writing the book is not just to put out there the story, of having a rainbow baby. It's just it's broader than that. It's, the story about resilience, the story about hope. Everybody's journey might look or would look different than mine, but there's lots of similarities. But I do want it to be looked at as a tool that, maybe someone going through it can use to sort of supplement, what they're going through, and maybe see it as a ray of positivity versus, this is a book about infertility. It's a book about coming out on the other end.
And Jennifer, if someone watching or listening to this podcast has just experienced a miscarriage, is beginning IVF, or feels like giving up hope, what would you want them to hear?
I would really want them to hear, first and foremost, you're not alone. Because it can be very isolating. For me, having a child in my late 40s, I was surrounded by friends and family whose kids were going off to college. So it was hard to find people to relate to. So I would say and there's lots of them out there, find a support system for you that fits your narrative, because it's not one size fits all. Going to, a group of folks that have a different infertility need than you might not fit your support. So just do some research, get support around you, because that's what will kind of guide you through the next steps.
And when you look at your son, Nicholas, now, what emotions come to mind knowing everything your family endured to reach this chapter in your life?
Pure joy.
Mm.
Just pure joy. I look at him and I can't believe he's going to be 7 years old. I'm so grateful for where we are. We still have some challenges ahead, but I feel, I feel proud of myself for, going through everything I did to have him, and very fortunate that he's such a great kid. And that, I was blessed to get to this point after so many years. Many women don't get that opportunity. So for me, I see pure joy is really the only way I can state it.
Rainbow Baby is an inspiring reminder that hope and heartbreak often walk hand in hand, and that our greatest miracles sometimes arrive after our greatest challenges. Your honesty is certain to comfort countless readers and encourage conversations that have remained silent for far too long. And this book, Rainbow Baby, is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, MiltonandHugo.com as well. Congratulations, Jennifer, on writing such a courageous and heartfelt memoir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it with you today.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, and thank you for watching and for listening. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe to the Speaking of Writers podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a review, share this episode with a friend, and join us next time as we continue bringing you conversations with today's most compelling authors. I'm Steve Richards. I will talk to you again next time. This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards.